The afternoon sun in Makuru was harsh that day, burning down on the dusty streets and the small stalls that lined the market road. Zainab had been walking since morning, carrying her baby boy, Toby, wrapped tightly against her back with a faded yellow cloth. She sold oranges and bananas, calling to passers-by with a tired but gentle voice. Her hands were rough from work, but every time she looked at Toby's tiny face, her heart softened. He was her joy, her reason to keep moving even when her feet hurt and her stomach ached from hunger. By noon the market grew quieter. Many sellers packed up, but Zainab stayed, hoping to earn a little more before sunset. Sweat dripped from her forehead and the heat made her dizzy. Finally, she saw a tree not far from the stalls, a tall tree with wide leaves that offered cool shade. She spread a small mat beneath it and sat down with Toby in her arms. The gentle rustle of leaves and the distant sound of traders talking made her eyes grow heavy. She looked down at Toby. He was smiling in his sleep, his tiny fingers curled like petals. "Just a little rest," she whispered to herself. Only for a moment. Her eyes slowly closed. She dreamed of better days, of a small house, of laughter, of Toby running freely in a field. In her dream there was no hunger, no fear, no long days under the hot sun. She didn't know how long she slept, but when she woke something felt wrong. The air was too quiet. Her arms were light. Her heart suddenly raced. She turned quickly. The mat was empty. "Toby?" she called softly, thinking he might have rolled away. But there was no sound. "Toby!" she cried again, louder this time, standing up and looking around wildly. The fruit basket was still there, her mat still spread out, but her baby was gone. Her legs trembled. She searched behind the tree beside the road near the market stalls. The few people who were still there looked up as she screamed his name again and again. "Have you seen my baby? Please?" she begged a woman selling water nearby. The woman shook her head quickly, her eyes wide. "I didn't see anyone," she said. Zainab's breath came fast. Panic filled her chest like a heavy stone. She ran through the market, calling for her son, her voice breaking each time she said his name. People began to gather. Some helped her look, others only whispered, how could she fall asleep with a baby in the open? Tears streamed down her face as she searched the nearby alley, the small shops, the corners where children usually played. There was no sign of him. Only the soft wind moved through the empty spaces. A man in a blue shirt, one of the shopkeepers, approached her. "I saw you sitting there," he said quietly. "But I didn't see anyone take the child." Zainab's hands trembled. "Please help me find him." "He's my only child," she cried. The man nodded and called out to others. Soon more people joined the search. They looked under stalls, inside parked carts, and along the nearby paths, but the baby was nowhere to be found. The sky began to change color as the sun lowered. The shadows stretched across the ground, and Zainab still hadn't found her son. She sank to her knees near the tree where it had all started. The mat lay there quietly, mocking her pain. She pressed her palms to the earth and whispered, "Please God, don't take my child. Please bring him back." An old woman from the market placed a hand on Zainab's shoulder. "You must go to the police," she said gently. "They will help you search before it gets dark." Zainab nodded weakly, her eyes swollen with tears. She picked up the small blue cloth that had once wrapped her baby. It was lying near the mat, half covered in dust. She held it to her chest as if it were his tiny body. As she walked toward the police station, her steps were slow and heavy. The sounds of the market faded behind her, replaced by the distant barking of dogs and the hum of evening traffic. Every heartbeat was filled with guilt. How could she have fallen asleep? Why hadn't she tied him closer, or asked someone to watch him for a moment? At the police gate, a guard looked at her tear-streaked face and opened the door without question. Inside she tried to speak, but her voice broke with every word. "My baby, he's gone." An officer, a tall man with kind eyes, offered her a seat. "We will help you," he said firmly. "Tell me everything you remember." Zainab told them about the market, the tree, the nap, the moment she woke up. The officer took notes and asked questions, but she barely heard him. Her mind was replaying the same image, the empty mat, the silence, the space where Toby had been. By nightfall, a small team went back to the market with lanterns. They searched every corner again, calling the baby's name into the darkness. But the night gave no answers. Zainab sat on the steps of the police station, her head buried in her hands. The officer brought her a bottle of water. "We'll keep looking," he said quietly. "Don't lose hope." She nodded but said nothing. Hope was hard to find in her heart now. She looked up at the moon, bright, distant, and cold, and whispered, "Toby, wherever you are, Mama will find you." The night wind brushed past her face, gentle but empty, carrying with it the faint sounds of the sleeping town. Somewhere out there her baby was alive. She could feel it. She had to believe it. And as she sat there under the silver light, Zainab made a silent promise to herself. No matter how long it took, no matter how far she had to go, she would never stop searching until she held her son again. The sun was slowly setting over the small town of Makuru, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The streets were beginning to quiet down as people returned home after a long day. Near the edge of the market, not far from the park where Zainab had fallen asleep, a soft cry broke the evening silence. It was faint at first, almost like the wind, but soon it grew louder, the cry of a baby who had been alone for too long. Ngozi, a woman in her 30s with a warm face and kind eyes, was walking home from her small food stall. She carried a basket of leftover plantains and yams on her head. When she heard the sound, she stopped. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked around, but the street was nearly empty. The cry came again, this time from under the big mango tree near the footpath. She hurried toward the sound, her sandals slapping against the dusty ground. There, lying on a patch of dry grass, was a tiny baby wrapped in a small blue cloth. His face was red from crying, and his little fists waved helplessly in the air. Ngozi gasped and quickly dropped her basket. "Oh, poor child," she whispered, kneeling beside him. She lifted the baby gently into her arms, rocking him to calm his cries. "Who left you here, my sweet one?" she said softly, looking around for any sign of the mother. But the road was empty, and the nearby shops were already closing. Only the sound of distant voices and the rustle of leaves filled the air. She looked around again, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here? Did someone lose a baby?" No one answered. A few people passed by, glancing at her curiously, but they shook their heads when she asked if they had seen anyone leave a child behind. Ngozi's heart ached. The baby's face reminded her of her own child who had died years ago. She had no children left, and seeing this little one so helpless made her eyes fill with tears. "Don't cry," she whispered to the baby, pressing him close to her chest. "You are safe now." She hurried home, holding him tightly as if afraid the wind might take him away again. Her house was small, 2 rooms made of brick and tin with a cooking fire outside and a mat on the floor. Her elderly neighbor, Mama Ife, was sitting outside peeling cassava when Ngozi arrived. "Ah, Ngozi, what's that in your arms?" the old woman asked. Ngozi explained what she had found. "I couldn't just leave him there," she said, her voice trembling. "He would have died alone." Mama Ife nodded slowly. "You did the right thing, my dear. But you must go to the police tomorrow. Maybe the mother is looking for him." "I will," Ngozi promised. "But tonight he needs food and warmth." She went inside, lit a small lantern, and placed the baby on a soft cloth. He had stopped crying now and was looking around with wide, curious eyes. She smiled gently, warmed some milk, and fed him with a small spoon. The baby drank eagerly, his tiny hands clutching her finger. "Ah, you must be very hungry," she murmured. "Don't worry. You are safe here." As the baby fell asleep, Ngozi sat beside him and watched his tiny chest rise and fall. She couldn't help but wonder who his mother was. Had she run away? Was she hurt? Or was this baby abandoned on purpose? The thought made her shiver. Outside, the wind grew cooler. Dogs barked in the distance, and the sound of drums echoed faintly from a nearby compound. Inside her little house, the baby slept peacefully for the first time that day. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Zainab was still running. Her feet were bleeding, her throat dry, but she didn't stop. She searched every street corner, every alley, calling her baby's name until her voice broke. "Toby, my son, where are you?" she cried. Her eyes were swollen with tears, and her heart felt like it would burst from her chest. People pitied her as she passed. Some helped her search, others whispered, shaking their heads. "Poor woman," one man said. "She must have fallen asleep. Now her baby is gone." Zainab didn't care about what they said. She would not rest until she found her child. She went back to the market, to the tree, to the empty mat. She picked it up and held it close, her tears falling on the worn fabric. "I will not give up," she whispered. "I will find you." At that moment, the police were already moving through nearby streets, showing people a small picture of the baby from Zainab's phone. But Makuru was large, with many roads and many faces. No one had seen a thing. Back at Ngozi's home, the baby stirred and began to whimper again. She picked him up and patted his back gently. "Shoo, my little one," she whispered. "You are not alone anymore." But deep in her heart, Ngozi knew this peace could not last. She was not the child's mother, and somewhere out there, someone must be missing him desperately. She closed her eyes and prayed quietly, "Lord, guide me. Help me return this child to where he belongs." That night, as the moon rose high over Makuru, two women prayed under the same sky, one asking for her lost child to be found, the other asking for the strength to protect him until that moment came. Neither of them knew that their paths were about to cross in a way that would change both of their lives forever. The morning light fell over Makuru as Zainab walked into the police station, her eyes red and tired from crying all night. Her hands trembled as she held a small blanket, the one her baby, Toby, had been wrapped in before he disappeared. Officer Bello, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a calm voice, motioned for her to sit. "Tell me everything," he said gently. Zainab took a shaky breath and told him what had happened, how she had fallen asleep under the tree, how she woke to find her baby gone, how she had searched until her legs gave out. Her voice broke many times, and by the end of her story, even the young constables nearby had grown quiet. Officer Bello nodded slowly. "We will find him," he said. "I promise you that. We'll search every corner of Makuru." He wrote down her statement, asked for a picture of Toby, and immediately sent officers out to different parts of the town. Posters were printed with the baby's photo, a small face with round cheeks and curious eyes. They pinned them to street poles, market stalls, and the gates of the bus station. "Lost child, baby Toby. If found, please report to the Makuru police station." The message spread fast. Women in the market whispered about it while sorting tomatoes. Taxi drivers talked about it at the junction. Even children began to call out, "Have you seen baby Toby?" Zainab joined the search every day. She went from one end of town to the other, her sandals covered in dust, her heart heavy but still hopeful. She stopped people on the street, showing them Toby's picture. "Please, have you seen my baby?" she asked again and again. Most people shook their heads sadly. Some gave her water, some offered food, but no one had seen him. Days turned into nights, and the nights felt longer than ever. Zainab could barely eat or sleep. She sat by her small window, staring at the moon, whispering prayers. "Please God, let my son be safe. Don't let him be alone." Meanwhile, in a quiet part of Makuru far from the noise of the market, little Toby lay peacefully in Ngozi's arms. The woman who had found him cared for him like he was her own child. Her small home now smelled of baby soap and warm milk. Every morning, she bathed him carefully, wrapped him in clean cloth, and sang to him softly as the birds began to sing outside. "Sleep, my little one," she would hum. "The sun will rise for you." The neighbors had started to notice the baby. "Ngozi, where did you get this child?" they asked with curiosity. "I found him crying under the mango tree," she replied honestly. "I took him in so he wouldn't suffer." Some nodded with approval. Others looked at her with doubt. "You should tell the police," one woman said. "They are looking for a missing baby." Ngozi hesitated. She knew the right thing would be to report it. But each time she looked at the baby, something in her heart whispered, "Not yet." He had filled a space in her life that had been empty for years. She had lost her own child long ago, and now this baby's laughter filled her home with warmth again. At night, as she watched him sleep, she would whisper, "You are safe with me, little one. I won't let anyone hurt you." Still, her heart was divided, between the joy of caring for him and the guilt that she might be keeping him from his real mother. Meanwhile, the police continued to search. Officer Bello spoke to taxi drivers, shopkeepers, and fruit vendors. "Have you seen a woman with a baby that doesn't belong to her?" he asked. A few leads came, but none led to the truth. The city was large, full of people coming and going. Days turned into weeks. Zainab grew thinner and weaker, but she refused to give up. "He's alive," she told herself every morning. "I can feel it. My Toby is alive." One afternoon, she stood near the riverbank where people washed clothes. The sky was gray, and her voice was hoarse from calling his name so many times. She sank to her knees, sobbing. "Please just show me where he is." Not far from there, Toby was giggling in Ngozi's small courtyard, playing with a wooden spoon. His laughter filled the air, light and joyful. Ngozi smiled, watching him crawl toward her. "Ah, my brave boy," she said, lifting him up. "You are getting stronger every day." She kissed his forehead gently, though a small pain pricked her heart. "But who are you really?" she whispered. "Where do you come from?" That night, as she fed him, she looked at the small blue cloth he had been wrapped in. The corner of it had faint writing, a name faintly stitched in red thread, Toby. Her hands froze. The name echoed in her mind. It was the same name she had heard people whisper about at the market, the missing baby. Her heart began to race. No, it can't be, she murmured. But deep down she knew the truth. The baby she had grown to love, the one who smiled at her like the sun, belonged to someone else. She sat awake that night, holding him close, tears falling silently. What do I do now? She asked the darkness. If I give him back, my house will be empty again. But if I keep him, I'll be stealing someone's happiness. Outside, the night wind blew softly through the trees, carrying the distant sound of a mother's prayer, Zainab's voice, whispering into the heavens. The same moonlight that touched her face also touched Ngozi's home, where the baby slept in peace, unaware that two women, one by blood, one by love, were both fighting the same battle of the heart. And as the town of Mukuru slept, fate quietly began to weave the thread that would soon bring them together. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops of Mukuru when the market began to fill with life again. Sellers called out prices, the smell of roasted corn filled the air, and women balanced baskets on their heads, moving gracefully through the crowd. Zainab walked among them, her steps slow, her eyes tired but still searching, as she had done every day since her baby disappeared. It had been 3 long weeks. Every morning she prayed, "Please God, let me see him today," and every night she cried herself to sleep. But that morning felt different. The air seemed calmer, the wind warmer. Something inside her heart whispered, "Keep walking." She passed by the yam stall, the tailor's corner, and the spice sellers. Then just ahead she saw a woman buying vegetables, a woman holding a baby. The child was wrapped in a blue cloth. Zainab froze. The world around her seemed to go silent. That cloth, she knew it. Every thread, every small tear at the edge she had sewn herself. Her heart began to pound as tears filled her eyes. "That's my son," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then louder, desperate, "That's my son." The people around turned quickly. The woman with the baby, Ngozi, turned too, startled by the cry. For a moment their eyes met. Zainab's face was pale, her hands shaking as she pointed at the baby. Ngozi looked down at the child in her arms, little Toby, and then back at Zainab. The truth hit her like lightning. The names stitched on the cloth, the whispers in the market, the prayer in the night, it all made sense now. Zainab ran forward, but her knees almost gave way before she reached them. "Please," she cried, "let me see his face." The market women gasped and surrounded them, forming a small circle. Some whispered, "Is it really her baby?" Others watched silently, sensing the weight of the moment. Ngozi held the child close, tears already forming in her eyes. "I found him," she said softly. "He was alone under a mango tree. I didn't know who he belonged to. I only wanted to keep him safe." Zainab covered her mouth with her trembling hand. She reached out slowly, afraid this was just another dream that would fade. "Please," she whispered, "please let me hold him." Ngozi looked down at the baby, his big, curious eyes looking up at both women, and then gently handed him over. The moment Zainab felt the small body in her arms, her world came alive again. "Toby," she cried, clutching him tightly against her chest. "My baby, my Toby." Her tears fell on his face and the boy laughed, that sweet, innocent sound that Zainab had missed for so long. The market women began to clap and cheer, shouting, "Praise be! The mother has found her child." At that moment, Officer Bello arrived, having heard the commotion from nearby. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes moving from Zainab to Ngozi, then to the baby. "What's happening here?" he asked. Zainab looked up, her face shining with tears. "She found him," she said. "This woman saved my son." Officer Bello took a deep breath, looking at Ngozi with kindness. "You found him under the tree?" "Yes," Ngozi said quietly. "I thought someone would come for him. But when no one did, I took him home. I didn't mean to keep him forever. I couldn't let him suffer." Her voice broke at the last word. The officer nodded slowly, understanding. "You did what many might not have done. You kept him safe when the world turned away." He turned to the crowd and raised his hand. "Let everyone know, this woman is not guilty of any wrongdoing. She gave this child warmth, food, and love. Without her, he might not be alive today." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some women wiped their eyes. Even the traders who had stopped to watch were moved. Zainab stepped closer to Ngozi, still holding Toby tightly. Her voice was soft but full of emotion. "I can never repay you," she said. "You gave me back my life. I thought I had lost him forever." Ngozi smiled weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I only did what any mother's heart would do," she replied. Maybe God let me find him so I could help you." Zainab reached out and took Ngozi's hand. "Then let's both thank God," she said. Because he used you to save my child. The two women hugged, one mother by birth, the other by grace, and the people around them clapped louder. It was a moment that filled the market with hope and faith. Even the harsh sun seemed gentler that morning. Officer Bello smiled as he watched them. This is how Makuru should be, he said quietly. Not divided by fear or judgment, but united by kindness. He turned to the people. Let this be a lesson to us all. Never rush to blame, never turn away when someone needs help. As the crowd began to clear, Zainab and Ngozi sat together on a bench near the fruit stall. Toby slept peacefully between them, his small hand resting on both their laps. Zainab looked at Ngozi. Will you come to see him sometimes? Ngozi hesitated. If you'll allow me, she said. Zainab smiled. You saved him. You'll always have a place in his life. They sat together in silence, listening to the market's gentle rhythm, the laughter of children, the calls of traders, the hum of life continuing as before. For the first time in many days, Zainab's heart was at peace. She had learned that love sometimes came in unexpected ways, that even strangers could carry light into the darkest corners of one's life. And as the sun rose higher, the people of Makuru went about their day, whispering to one another about what they had witnessed, 2 mothers, 1 child, and a miracle that had turned grief into grace. The story would soon spread across the town, of the careless mistake that became a lesson in compassion, and of a stranger whose kindness gave life back to a mother's heart. And from that day, every time Zainab walked past the mango tree, she would stop, touch its bark gently and whisper, "Thank you." Because beneath that tree, her story of loss had become a story of love. The years passed gently in the town of Makuru, but the memory of that day never left Zainab's heart. Each morning she woke up before the sun, held Toby close, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Every time she looked into his smiling eyes, she remembered how easily she could have lost him, and how one woman's kindness had changed everything. Zainab became known across the town as a strong, careful mother. She still sold fruits in the market, but now she carried Toby on her back as she worked. Even when he grew older, he stayed close to her stall, helping her count coins or arrange oranges in neat rows. The people often said, "No one watches her child like Zainab. She guards him with her heart." But Zainab's care did not come from fear anymore, it came from gratitude. She had learned her lesson deeply, one that shaped every step of her life. She never blamed herself in anger again. Instead, she taught others to be mindful, to hold on to what truly mattered before it slipped away. Every week she visited Ngozi. The 2 women had become as close as sisters. They shared meals, laughter, and stories about their children. Sometimes Zainab would bring Toby to Ngozi's small house, where he would run around the yard while the 2 women talked under the shade of the mango tree, the same kind of tree where he had been found years ago. One afternoon as they sat together, Zainab looked at Ngozi and said softly, "Do you ever wonder why it was you who found him?" Ngozi smiled. "Maybe God wanted to teach us both something," she said. "You learned care. I learned courage. Sometimes life brings strangers together to finish each other's lessons." Zainab nodded slowly. "You're right," she said. "That day could have broken me, but you turned it into something good." From that moment, their friendship became a living example of how kindness can heal what carelessness once damaged. Whenever people in Makuru argued or refused to help one another, someone would remind them, "Do you not remember Zainab and Ngozi? Even a mistake can lead to a blessing if your heart stays open." As Toby grew older, he heard his story again and again, how his mother fell asleep, how a stranger found him, and how love brought them back together. One day when he was about 10, he asked his mother, "Mama, were you scared that day?" Zainab smiled sadly. "Yes, my son. I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. But when God wanted to show mercy, he sent me an angel in the form of a woman named Ngozi." Toby thought for a moment and said, "Then I have 2 mothers." Zainab laughed and kissed his forehead. "Yes," she said. "2 mothers, one who gave you life and one who kept you alive." That answer became a favorite saying in Makuru. The market women would repeat it with smiles whenever they saw the boy helping both women, 2 mothers, 1 heart. Years went by and their story became part of the town's memory. Old men would tell it to young traders sitting by the fire. Mothers would whisper it to daughters who had just given birth. Even the police officer, Bello, would mention it when warning travelers to be cautious and kind. "Remember," he'd say, "carelessness can bring danger, but kindness can bring salvation." Zainab and Ngozi proved it. Sometimes, Zainab would sit outside in the evening watching Toby play with the other children. She would hear laughter, see the colors of sunset touch the rooftops, and feel peace. Her mistake had once filled her with shame, but now it had turned into a story of hope, a reminder that even when people fall, they can rise again through love. When Toby turned 12, Zainab and Ngozi planned a small celebration. Friends gathered, music played, and children ran through the streets with joy. During the meal, an elder woman stood and raised her hand. "Let this day remind us," she said, "that no one is perfect, but the good in our hearts can correct the wrongs of our past." Everyone clapped, and Zainab felt tears in her eyes. She looked at Ngozi sitting beside her and whispered, "Thank you, for that day and for every day since." Ngozi squeezed her hand and said, "You don't need to thank me anymore, sister. We both walked through pain to reach this peace. Now let's teach others to do the same." And they did. Together they started helping mothers in the town. Women who worked long hours, women who struggled to feed their children, women who had made mistakes and needed another chance. They created a small group called the Mothers of Mercy, and soon people came from nearby villages to listen to their advice. "Love your children," Zainab would say, "but also love yourself enough to stay alert. And never walk past someone in need," Ngozi would add, "because you never know when your kindness might save a life." Their words spread far and wide, reaching homes beyond Makuru. People began telling the story in churches, schools, and marketplaces. It became a lesson, a warning, and a blessing all at once. Even long after the two women grew older, their story continued to live in the hearts of those who heard it. And whenever someone told the tale of the careless mother and the kind stranger, they always ended with the same words that carried both wisdom and warmth. Carelessness can break a moment, but kindness can save a life.